Hey, Guoba here. The very first video I ever did was on 3-star light cones, as I wanted to bring info on a niche subject, and I knew from Genshin just how strong some low rarity weapons could be. Despite doing my best afterwards to introduce some 3-star light cones into the theory crafting circles, many still don't know which 3-star light cones to keep and how good some of them can be. And since I am much bigger now, I can help out more people with this topic. Thanks to Dreamy, by the way, for motivating me to remake this video, as she recently performed an awesome zero cycle thanks to a light cone I doubt you'd even heard of, but one that I hoped would work since before the game even released. So like and sub if this helped, and let's begin. Let's start by dismissing the fodder light cones. I do keep a maxed superimposition copy or two of every 3-star just in case, and I think everyone should, but here are the worst 3-star light cones. Sagacity gives a large self-attack % buff, but only that, and the base stats are too weak to consider. Hidden Shadow has a nice bonus attack multiplier after using a skill in 2 basic, but the stats suck, and there are so many great 4-star Nihility light cones. Adversarial gives a large speed buff upon killing an enemy, but again weak base stats. Shattered Home's conditional buff is a bit cringe, and not even that strong. Darting Arrow is the attack % version of Adversarial, but the low base attack makes his attack % buff pretty weak. Databank is just make the world clamor but worse, and that light cone is already pretty bad. Defense has a cool passive, but that low base defense is terrible for preservation. Void's passive is underwhelming and non-existent after 3 turns. If you're clearing overworld and need the free stats, cool, but in any meaningful content you can't use this. Collapsing Sky gives some nice sounding buffs, except you only usually use skill or enhanced basic attacks, and so you will only get 40% damage for one of those, not both. And the 40% damage isn't worth the drop in base stats, even on Jing Yuan as a budget option. Finally, Arrows has the same problem as Void, and the low base stats means you can't cheese with this on zero cycle stuff with the free crit rate. Next, we will talk about light cones that are powerful in the early game. Amber provides a decent base defense compared to the other 3-star preservation light cones, along with a potential 64% defense in its passive. Many used this in the early game, and some probably still use it to this day. It's very cheap to upgrade and max out and serves its purpose. There's not much more to it. Chorus is an early game harmony option, but should be replaced pretty quickly. However, a 12% attack buff for just being in the team is great to beat early content. Though if you are early game, you'll also have access to the real best harmony light cone, which we will see later. Since you wouldn't have access to 5-star energy ropes straight away though, I can see why this would be prioritized. Cornucopia, sometimes referred to as Cornucope, is a great early game light cone for abundance units when you lack survivability, with its high base HP and outgoing healing on either skill or ultimate. Abundance do have a range of better light cones in utility and healing though, so you'd swap off this eventually. Now let's discuss some niche ones next. These light cones could serve a purpose if you want to get funky, or act as a budget option on some DPS units I will mention. Mediation is a harmony light cone that grants all allies a 1-turn 20 speed buff at the start of the battle. This won't work on an extra wave. If it did, it could actually be used as a pretty strong zero cycle light cone, allowing supports like Bronny and Huohuo to hit very high speed breakpoints used for their zero cycle techs. Nonetheless, the speed is still useful in my eyes. In farming overworld, if you're one of those gamers, or in simulated universe, you may have times where the enemies are faster than you. This can be annoying versus fodder enemies who will die in your one combo, especially if you run a slow DPS who needs to wait after every enemy has taken their turn. This light cone could be used to push your whole team ahead of the enemies, allowing for a much faster farming session. Pioneering restores 20% max HP upon breaking an enemy weakness and is a preservation light cone, and this idea came from Dreamy. It has the same weak stats as defense, however will heal much more in theory on a preservation that can break a ton, and that one would be Fire Trailblazer as a solo sustain. They have a guaranteed taunt with 67% effect hit rate, meaning they can tank tons of shots, and then ult and enhance basic into fire weak content, and heal it all back up. With a Ruan Mei, you're also looking at 1.5 times the break power. Outside of Fire MC into Fire Weak, it's not great though, and this is more for fun. If we see high break tanks in the future though, maybe this cone will see some use. Mutual Demise is a 3-star destruction light cone granting 24% crit rate provided you're under 80% HP. The passive is pretty strong, but the base attack is rough. Base HP however is not too bad, and the passive being so strong means Blade can use this as a budget light cone for the early game, or in case of no other good options like an S1 Secret Vow. The only problem with this is in the presence of a very strong sustain that puts you above the 80% max HP threshold. Loop is a 3-star Nihility light cone granting 48% damage to slowed enemies. Slowed enemies just means if their speed is reduced in some way. This cone is really only a good option on Welt, who can slow reliably. Silverwolf can slow, but it's slow to apply to everyone, and she's not a traditional DPS. This light cone also gets overshadowed by Goodnight Sleep Well pretty easily at S1, so just like Mutual Demise, it's a budget option for a specific DPS. Passkey is a 3-star erudition light cone granting 12 energy upon using your skill. This is such a fun light cone to use, especially on units that generate tons of energy like Serval. Unfortunately, its low base stats and lack of offensive passive means it sucks on crit DPS. The way I see it being viable is on break builds for erudition DPS, since they lack a break effect cone right now, and this energy translates to more ults, which means more breaks, and they don't care about the stats because they're going break. Artumba and I used this on our break effect Jing Yuan and got 2 turn ultimates, which was very fun. Finally, Fine Fruit is a cone I love the sound of in my first video. It is a 3-star abundance light cone, generating 12 energies for all allies upon entering battle. It being abundance means you aren't taking up a Harmony light cone slot either, but still gain a great benefit. This light cone has been used in the past and quite recently by Dreamy, who uses the energy to gain an earlier turn of ultimates. So in those cases, you're 1 energy off a Pala ult, well, no longer. It is also very effective for units who end up at less than 20 energy on their first turn, since they'd normally have to basic or skill and waste potential energy. Now they can ult first and then do their action. For 0 cycle clears, this cone can be great. It can also be used like or even with Mediation's 1-turn speed buff as a way to quickly clear overworld and simulated universe enemies. One example of Fine Fruit I use myself is to grant extra energy to my Lune since I don't have E6 Jing Yuan, allowing him to ult and act, since he's E2, at 0 action value, which is pretty crazy. Now it's time for the final bosses of light cones. These two are so good that they are better than 5 stars of the same path. Ranked Guoba tier in my first video before the game even released, Multiplication is a beast of a light cone. It shouldn't be shoved onto any abundance unit, especially ones that require perhaps lower speed or want to skill frequently, but when it does work, it is crazy. After using a basic attack, the Whereas action is advanced by 20%. At first that might sound a bit whack, but you must understand how action advance works. The action value you need to take a turn after basic attacking is now at 80% of the original amount, and this works at any speed. If you have 100 speed, you're acting at 80 action value instead of 100. This is a 1.25 times increase in speed. So on Bailu at max investment, Luocha, Natasha even, Lynx if your team allows it, you put this cone on them, you basic attack, and your speed will now be at a theoretical 1.25 times of its value at any speed. Speed percent buffs are based on the base speed of a unit. Action Advance acts on your total speed. If you have a 161 speed Luocha with this cone, he is now theoretically at 201 speed and will act twice every cycle, generating enough skill points to feed a whole family. If you do need to skill, you gain less of a bonus, and a unit like Huohuo may need to be nearer to their team to gain the energy from her traces for her ultimate. Now onto my boy, my baby meshing Cogs, the light cone I've shielded more than my own channel. And just to know, if you see this variant of Cogs, you are in presence of a fraud Cogs light cone, and you should immediately call the nearby moderation team. Meshing Cogs gives the wearer 8 energy upon attacking or being attacked, once a turn on this attacking energy. Harmony units absolutely need their energy, as getting their ultimate quicker provides so much team or DPS buffing potential. This energy is multiplied by energy recharge, which Harmony units naturally love. Harmony units also won't be using non-attacking skills on most of their turns, barring a Bronya. What this means is you can gain 8 energy every turn on some units and most turns on others, allowing for the best energy generation out of any Harmony cone, beating Bronya's cone and Carve the Moon in energy gain. On Hanya, using Meshing Cogs gives you a 1 turn shorter rotation. On Asta likewise. And on later Eidolons, she gains access to skill point positive upgraded rotations, crazy 2-turn rotations, and even a 3 basic rotation with Cogs. Ruan Mei gains access to a guaranteed 3-turn rotation with Meshing Cogs, although she needs break effect stats, so watch out on that one. Ting Yun gets a very strong 3-turn ultimate with Cogs. Yukong, just like Asta, gets reduced rotations or more skill point positive rotations, and at E6 with Von Whack and Energy Rope, you can even triple basic with Cogs to avoid any speed tuning at all, since her E6 grants her roaring bowstrings wherever she ults. Bronya is the only unit so far that can't effectively use Cogs due to her constant use of skill, and even in skill point neutral setups it doesn't do much for her, as an Energy Rope can't do otherwise. Now, Memories of the Past is, some would say, a premium version of meshing Cogs, but much harder to get, with better base stats and a break effect passive. This break effect passive is very useful for Ruan Mei, and perhaps a break Asta or Hanya for damage. However, despite the wording saying once per turn, the on being attacked energy of meshing Cogs is once per enemy, meaning you can get much more energy than Memories of the Past. This is technically RNG energy and isn't counted into guaranteed rotations that I calculate, but that 1000 aggro Jing Yuan on meshing Cogs will be ulting so much more. So I hope this helped, like and sub if it did, and remember to share the word of the great Coggers. Thank you to all my members, thanks for watching and have a good day.